They thought she was invisible until the prince followed the scent of her bread. Nestled between low-rolling hills and groves of baobab trees, the village of Kigalema had always moved at the rhythm of the sun. Life was slow, steady, and filled with routines handed down through generations. The people here believed in tradition and order. Every morning, the crowing of the roosters signaled the beginning of another day, and the village awoke to the scent of smoke from clay ovens, the chatter of women fetching water, and the shuffle of old men sitting beneath the acacia tree. In the heart of Kigalema stood a modest clay house with a crooked tin roof and a wooden sign that read Kazi's Bakery. The paint had faded, but the reputation hadn't. For years, it had been the only bakery in the region, known for its soft millet rolls and honey-glazed flatbread. Inside, before dawn cracked the sky, one could always find a young woman with flour on her cheeks and fire in her eyes. Nia was the daughter of Bwana Kazi, a once-renowned baker who had fallen into silence after his wife died. Though Nia was his child, it often seemed as if he had forgotten that. He remarried soon after her mother passed away, and from that new union came Mara, Nia's stepsister, loud and vibrant like a festival drum, always demanding attention. Nia, on the other hand, was everything Mara was not. Where Mara walked in fine fabric with jingling bracelets, Nia moved quietly in a plain cotton wrapper stained with flour and smoke. Where Mara laughed loudly and talked over everyone, Nia listened, her voice barely rising above a whisper. Yet, in that silence was a strength that not many understood. Each morning, Nia would knead dough while the rest of the household still slept. Her fingers were strong, her arms used to the labor. She had learned baking not from words but from watching her father back when he still cared to teach. Now the bakery was her duty, unpaid, unpraised, but sacred. She considered it the last piece of her mother's spirit that still lived on. But Mara, spoiled by her mother and adored by Bwana. Kazi looked at Nia with contempt. Every time someone in the village praised the bread, every time a traveler asked who had made such delicious rolls, Mara burned. "You," she once hissed under her breath at Nia. "No one will ever choose a girl with cracked hands and no voice." But Nia never answered back. She simply kept kneading. In truth, the village of Kigalema saw her. The old women nodded approvingly when she passed, and the children often peered through the bakery's dusty window to watch her at work. Even the merchants, hardened by years of bartering, softened when they saw her carrying baskets of warm bread to the market. There was something about Nia that spoke without speaking. And then came the rumors. "Assad is coming," the young girls whispered in excited clusters near the well. "Prince Assad, the merchant of Maheli." "He's not just a merchant," someone corrected. "He's the richest spice trader in the southern provinces. They say he's looking for a bride." The entire village buzzed. Women dusted off their brightest wraps. Girls who never wore earrings suddenly borrowed their mothers. Every eligible woman from the neighboring villages began to visit Kigalema, hoping to be seen. Mara was convinced she would be chosen. "He will pick me," she said to her mother, examining herself in the polished copper plate they used as a mirror. "He wants beauty charm presents, I have it all." Her mother nodded in approval. "And we'll make sure Nia stays out of sight." But Nia didn't try to compete. She remained in the bakery, her hands busy with dough, her heart untouched by the glittering noise around her. It wasn't that she didn't believe in love, she simply didn't believe love would find her. 3 days later, Assad arrived. He came not with trumpets or guards, but quietly cloaked in a deep indigo robe. He walked through the village square where dozens of girls had gathered, their faces painted and their laughter loud. They curtsied and danced and smiled, but Assad barely glanced at them. Something else had caught his attention. The wind had carried the scent of fresh millet, bread earthy, warm, slightly sweet. It tugged at his senses and drew him down a narrow path past noisy drums and flirtatious smiles, to the door of the humble bakery. Inside, Nia was elbow-deep in dough shaping small flatbreads for the afternoon market. She didn't hear the door creak open. It wasn't until she turned to fetch water that she saw him standing there, tall, calm, and unfamiliar. Their eyes met. Assad said nothing. Nia blinked, unsure what to do. Her cheeks flushed, and without a word she wiped her hands on her apron, nodded politely, and gestured toward the table of cooling loaves. Assad walked over, picked up one, and took a bite. He didn't speak. But something settled in his eyes, something content, as if he had found what he didn't know he was searching for. That evening, a royal servant arrived at Bwana Kazi's home, with a chest carved in dark mahogany. Inside were bolts of silk perfumes from afar, and golden bracelets that shimmered under lamplight. The household exploded with excitement. Mara, standing at the door in her best wrapper, already prepared a thank you speech in her mind. But then the servant spoke. "These are for Naya, daughter of Bwana Kazi, keeper of the oven." There was silence. Mara's mouth dropped open. "What?" her mother barked. "Surely a mistake, he means Mara." But the servant shook his head. Prince Assad tasted her bread. He saw her eyes. He has chosen. Inside the house, Nia stood frozen, the silk trembling in her hands. She had never owned anything so fine. The last gift she remembered receiving was a small wooden spoon from her mother before she died. She didn't feel joy. She felt fear. What would happen now? From across the room, Mara watched her with eyes full of fire. That night, the silence in the house was heavier than usual. Mara paced the floor, her jaw tight. "He can't marry her," she hissed. "Not a girl who smells of smoke and yeast. No." Her mother gripped her arm. "Then we won't let him." In her room, Nia lay staring at the ceiling, unaware of the whispers crawling through the walls. Her heart was full of questions. Why had he chosen her? What did he see? She closed her eyes and tried to remember her mother's voice. She wore Nia's dress, her smile, even her name, but not her heart. The morning of Assad's return came quickly, too quickly for Nia. She had spent the night twisting in her thin blanket sleep, torn to pieces by nerves she couldn't name. Downstairs, the bakery was silent, the fire cold. She hadn't risen before dawn like usual. Her hands, so used to kneading, trembled. For the first time in years, she didn't bake. She waited, but someone else had risen early. In the kitchen, Mara stood beside a pot, carefully stirring a bowl of porridge laced with crushed mbegu leaves, a plant used in old village medicine to cause inflammation and fever. The powdered leaves had been smuggled into the kitchen the night before by her mother, wrapped in a cloth beneath her shawl. "This will do just enough," Mara whispered. Her mother nodded grimly. "It won't kill her, just enough to keep her out of sight." Mara poured the porridge into a small clay bowl and carried it up the stairs, her voice syrupy sweet. "Sister," she called softly, knocking on Nia's door. "You haven't eaten. Come. You need strength for today." Nia opened the door slowly, her face pale but warm with surprise. Mara never brought her food. "Oh, thank you," Nia said, taking the bowl with both hands. She sat on the edge of her bed and ate it gratefully. It tasted bitter, but she assumed it was just nerves. After all, what did she know about royal suitors or marriage, or why a man like Assad would choose someone like her? By midday, the first signs appeared. Her lips grew numb. Her skin flushed, then prickled. Her breathing became shallow. She reached for water, but it spilled as her hands shook. By late afternoon, Nia lay on her mat, eyes swollen nearly shut. Her throat burning, her joints aching as if fire lived in her bones. Her head spun. She tried to call for help, but her voice cracked, then faded completely. Downstairs, Mara waited. When her mother came to check, Mara only smiled. "She's quiet," she said. "I think it's working." "She'll miss the visit," her mother replied. "You know what to do." "Yes," Mara said, her voice hardening. "I've prepared everything." That evening, when Assad's messenger arrived to escort the bride-to-be for a private meeting before the ceremony, Mara descended the stairs, dressed in Nia's cleanest wrapper, a soft orange one with flower patterns on the hem. It was the same one Nia had worn the day Assad saw her baking. Her hair was braided like Nia's, her eyes painted with gentle shadow, her lips touched with crushed hibiscus for softness. She had even trained her voice to be quieter, slower. She walked with a grace she had never bothered to master, but now she wore it like a mask. In the guest courtyard, Assad stood waiting. His robes were deep green, embroidered with golden vines. He had brought no entourage this time, just a single attendant holding a box of ceremonial jewelry. Mara stepped forward slowly. Assad turned, and something in his face changed. He didn't smile. Not immediately. He looked at her, truly looked. His eyes scanned her from head to toe, then hovered at her hands. They were smoother than he remembered. No small scars, no traces of flour. He looked at her feet. They were soft, not calloused from years of standing at the oven. He looked at her face. Beautiful, yes. Familiar almost. But something was missing. Still, the elders were watching. Villagers gathered nearby, whispering. His attendant glanced at him, waiting. Mara lowered her gaze just as Nia once had. "Forgive me," she said softly. "Last time, I was shy." Assad hesitated, then gave a single nod. "Of course," he said, though doubt bloomed in his chest like dark mold. Behind the walls of the house, Nia lay motionless. The light through her window dimmed with the setting sun. She heard the faint sounds of music, drums, laughter, the rhythms of joy. A wedding, her wedding. But she couldn't move, couldn't scream, couldn't cry. Only her tears spoke. You can wear her wrapper, but not her soul. The morning after the wedding began with celebration. In the village square of Kigalema, drums echoed through the air, and voices lifted in song. Women danced in bright wrappers, and children ran barefoot between the rows of banana trees and clay huts, laughing unaware of the quiet storm gathering beneath the golden sky. At the center of it all stood Mara, draped in jewelry, wrapped in silks, wearing the title that was not hers. She smiled, for every elder bowed to every villager, and held Assad's arm like a trophy. Her voice was soft, her steps measured. She had trained herself well. But Assad had barely slept. He had spent the night beside a stranger. Her laughter rang hollow. Her voice, though mimicked, lacked depth. Her scent was perfume-sweet but unfamiliar. There were no traces of the oven, no warmth of bread or honey. Just a woman playing a role. His heart was restless, his eyes heavy with confusion, and the thought kept circling back in his mind like a hawk. Where is she? Where was the girl whose hands had flour in every crease? Where was the quiet kindness that had pierced through the noise of the world? The ceremony was brief. A symbolic binding with woven threads and a cup of millet drink passed between them. The village clapped. The elders declared the union blessed. But inside, Assad's soul was silent. That evening, under the ancient tree, where the council of elders held their meetings, Assad requested a gathering. At first, the elders were confused. The wedding was over, the union sealed. What more could there be to say? But when a prince asks for attention, even a silent one, tradition listens. The square filled again, not with music this time, but with murmurs. The mood had shifted. The air felt heavier. Assad stood tall before them, his ceremonial robe traded for a plain, dark tunic. His eyes scanned the crowd, firm, calm, resolute. Beside him, Mara stood in confusion, her mother clutching her hand tightly. Buonakazi looked nervous, beads of sweat forming along his brow. Assad raised his hand, and silence rippled across the crowd. "There has been a mistake," he began. Gasps broke out. Mara's fingers clenched into her mother's sleeve. "I came to Kigalema in search of truth," Assad continued. "Not just beauty, not title, not charm, truth." He stepped forward, voice steady. "I met a woman in a bakery. She said no words. She only smiled. Her hands were dusted in flour. Her presence was like morning light." He turned slowly to look at Mara. "She is not that woman." Mara's face paled. Assad removed the gold band from his finger and held it aloft. "I am not merely a merchant. I am Assad Kamari, Crown Prince of Maheli, and I will not crown a lie." Chaos erupted. Mara's mother shouted in protest. Buonakazi tried to step forward, stammering, but the elders raised their staffs, calling for quiet. "Then where is the girl you speak of?" the chief elder asked. Eyes narrowed with suspicion, but also curiosity. Assad bowed his head respectfully. "I do not know, but I intend to find her." A murmur spread like wildfire. The girl he spoke of, many assumed it had been Mara. She had played the part well, but now the story was unraveling. "She was real," Assad insisted, "and I know her heart even if others tried to steal her face." The chief elder raised his hand. "We will send runners. We will bring her." Mara's knees buckled. Her mother tried to steady her, but it was too late. The lie had begun to crack. From the edge of the crowd, a young boy ran up breathlessly. "They found her," he cried. "She's coming from the house." All eyes turned toward the narrow path between the trees. And then she appeared. She ruled not with jewels, but with flower and fire. The journey from Kigalema to Maheli was long, winding through dense forests, sunburnt plains, and rivers that shimmered like molten gold. But for Naya, every mile felt like something more, a shedding of her past. Each step away from the village where she had once been, silenced, brought her closer to something she hadn't dared to imagine belonging. Prince Assad rode beside her, not as a royal draped in command, but as a man walking beside a woman he saw, not for what she wore, but for who she was. When she asked him why he chose her, he simply said, "Because you didn't try to be chosen. You were already enough." The capital of Maheli welcomed their return with celebration. Drums echoed through stone-paved streets. Silk banners waved from balconies. Nobles and commoners alike filled the city's great square to greet their future queen. Many expected a woman wrapped in gold and rubies, a figure towering with regal splendor. But when Naya descended from the carriage, the crowd fell silent. She wore a simple cotton wrapper, the same one she had worn in the bakery the day Assad first saw her. Her head was bare, her face clean. She did not glide with grandeur. She walked with grace. At first, whispers stirred through the crowd. Some nobles blinked in confusion. A few even sneered. "That is our queen," someone murmured. But then a child in the front, a girl with tangled braids and bare feet, called out, "She's beautiful!" The crowd erupted in cheers. For Maheli had seen queens cloaked in power before, but never one who smiled like the sunrise and bowed her head with humility. The wedding was simple per Nia's request. No golden throne, no 20-course banquet. Just a ceremony in the palace garden beneath the shade of the great tamarind tree. Assad placed the royal circlet upon her head, and she in turn tied a strip of white cloth around his wrist, a baker's cloth, a reminder. "This is Queen Nia of Maheli, he declared. Not chosen by gold, but by heart. And the people cheered until the sky blushed with twilight. But Nia did not linger in gowns or luxury. Just days after the wedding, she made an unusual request. "I'd like a space," she told the palace steward. "Behind the royal kitchen, a place to bake." The steward blinked. "Bake, Your Highness?" "Yes." Nia replied, her tone calm. "My hands remember bread, and I want them to keep remembering." Soon, an unused storeroom was transformed into a warm, fragrant space. A stone oven was built, the kind she had used back in Kigalema. A table was placed by the window. Wooden bowls, clay jars for flour, honey, and salt. When the cooks asked if she needed help, Nia only smiled and said, "I'll teach you instead." And so the royal bakery was born, not out of duty, but love. Each morning, long before the palace stirred, the scent of warm bread drifted through the corridors. Nobles passing by would pause, inhale, and blink in wonder. Even the Queen Mother once said, "This bread tastes like memory." But it wasn't just for the palace. One afternoon, a girl appeared at the bakery door, skinny, barefoot, eyes wide with hunger. She didn't speak, just stared at the loaves cooling on the rack. Nia handed her one without a word. The next day there were 2 girls, the day after that 4. And so Nia began something new, a quiet revolution. She opened her space to orphaned girls, daughters of laborers, children, forgotten by the world. She taught them not just to bake, but to believe. "You don't need silk to be strong," she would say. "You need steady hands and a warm heart." Each girl was given an apron. Each learned to knead dough, light fires, shape loaves. And slowly, something changed. The palace no longer smelled of perfumes and wax. It smelled of cinnamon, firewood, and fresh bread. And the kingdom noticed. She returned barefoot, asking not for forgiveness, but for bread. It was a quiet morning in the capital of Maheli. The sky was pale with soft dawn light, and the courtyard of the royal palace was still shaded in blue. Birds fluttered through the garden hedges, and guards took their usual positions along the gates, with half-lidded eyes, the world not yet fully awake. Then came a sound, faint at first, like the dragging of cloth against stone. A woman stood outside the palace gates. Her dress was torn, barely more than a rag wrapped around her thin frame. Her hair was tangled, caked in dust. Her lips were dry, cracked. She wore no shoes. Her feet were blistered and swollen, every toe bruised from the miles she had walked. At first, the guards dismissed her. Another beggar, they thought. Another soul lost to the city's harsh edges. But then the woman spoke, her voice more breath than sound. "Tell the queen," she rasped. "Tell the queen. It's Mara." One of the younger guards blinked, uncertain. He turned to the captain. "Should we?" The captain, older and sharper-eyed, furrowed his brow. "Mara, the sister." The courtyard shifted. In moments, the news traveled like wind through a wheat field. Servants dropped their tasks. Pages whispered down corridors. The bakery girls paused their kneading. And in the heart of the palace, Queen Nia, now wearing a soft blue wrapper, stained lightly with flour, looked up from the dough in her hands. "She's here?" she asked quietly. The steward nodded, unsure of how to continue. Nia washed her hands in silence. Then she stood, smoothed her apron, and made her way to the courtyard. Outside, the crowd of onlookers parted as Nia approached. She moved calmly, her steps neither hurried nor hesitant. The people, both nobles and workers, watched with held breath. Many had heard the story of the sister who betrayed her, the wedding stolen the crown, faked the exile. But few had seen the 2 women side by side. Until now. Mara knelt at the foot of the palace steps, barely able to lift her head. Her body trembled from exhaustion, hunger, and shame. When she looked up and saw Naya, her eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I thought I could steal it. Your love, your life. But I didn't know love can't be stolen." Naya didn't speak. She only looked at her long and deep. Mara's voice cracked. "I have nothing. I've been sold, beaten, thrown away. I have begged for food, slept in gutters, worked until my hands bled. And none of it hurt as much as this." She touched her chest. "This ache, knowing what I took from you." She lowered her head again. "I came to beg, not for pity, but for a piece of bread." For a moment, the entire palace held its breath. Nia turned without a word and walked back inside. Mara didn't move. She assumed that was it, that her sister had walked away, finally done with her. But then only a few minutes later, Nia returned. In her hands was a single warm loaf of bread. She walked to the foot of the steps, crouched down, and placed it gently on the stone in front of Mara. Mara stared at it as if it were a treasure. "You didn't steal love," Nia said softly. "You stole pain, and now you carry it." Mara sobbed, her face crumbling into her palms. Nia stood slowly and turned away, not in anger, not in triumph, but in peace. She had no more to prove.